Good evening, everyone. Ankit here. Give me a minute. I'll set up the comment section. Yes, good evening, everyone. Today is 14th of May and we are going to discuss important news and articles that I've picked up from the Indian Express newspaper. We'll start our today's discussion by understanding why is Saudi actually wanting to sign a nuclear deal with US. We'll also cover the ways to eliminate tuberculosis in our discussion, but this article will be placed in the very end, right? So we'll start our today's discussion by understanding why is Saudi Arabia wanting to sign a nuclear deal with US and why US being the world's largest economy has some strategic and economic benefits with signing of nuclear deal with Saudi. So this is an article which is relevant from GS paper 2 perspective. So therefore we are going to understand the implications of this development, not just on Saudi Arabia and on US, but on the broader West Asia region. From US perspective, that region is called as Middle East region. So we'll try to understand that article. In the second article, we'll understand what is Schuman declaration, because recently on May 9th, 75th anniversary of this declaration adoption has been signed. Therefore, the probability of such questions appearing in the prelims automatically becomes important. So we'll try to understand what this declaration was all about, what it included, and how this evolved into a new organization that we know today. Right, this is again relevant from GS paper 2 and the important places in news. In the third article, we'll be understanding what is territorial army, because you understand as India went into a conflict with Pakistan, the government of India gave powers to the army chief to mobilize the cadres of territorial army. So in that regard, we'll try to understand what is territorial army, how it assists Indian army, what are the powers that gives to mobilize the officers and soldiers of territorial army. This will try to understand. And territorial army is something which is relevant from a security perspective, because they actually help Indian army to achieve its strategic, civil as well as administrative objectives. Okay. In the fifth article, we'll be understanding about a species that is in news, that is Indian grey wolves. Now, I've picked up this article from the Hindu newspaper. However, this article is something very important from our news perspective. Now, one of the students, he actually suggested me the particular article. So, in case if you feel that I have missed out on some articles, please feel free to tell me those articles in the comment section and I will make sure to cover them in our today's discussion. So, therefore, today we are going to cover Indian grey wolves. Indian grey wolves are in news because their population in the state of Maharashtra is dwindling, and this is because of some reasons which we'll understand in our today's discussion. This is relevant from GS paper 3 perspective. Then we'll cover an important place or important protected area that is in news, that is Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, because recently a forest ranger in Ranthambore Tiger Reserve was killed by one of the tigers. Therefore, this particular protected area becomes important. So, we'll also try to discuss it. This again becomes important from GS paper 3. And in the last article which we are going to cover today, it is about the ways to eliminate tuberculosis. So, we'll try to understand the various nuances of the disease, how is government trying to achieve the elimination of TB by next year. Okay. So these are the articles that we are going to cover today. As usual, the notes for this session will be available on my Telegram channel. This Telegram channel is called as ATS Live. So what you need to do is go to Telegram channel, click on the top right hand corner, that is the search button, enter the keywords ATS Live and you will find the channel. If you still don't, please scan this QR code. This will take you directly to the channel. Now, good evening Baga, good evening Sonu Kumar, Sonu Verma, good evening both of you, Tani, Udit and Reshma, good evening. Now let's start our today's discussion with this first article. This appeared in the explain section of the Indian Express newspaper, which is on page 9 today. And this talks about the reasons why Saudi Arabia is approaching US to sign a civil nuclear deal, much similar to the civil nuclear deal that India had signed with US, right? So in that regard, let us try to understand the context. Now Saudi Arabia and US, they are discussing a deal in order to cooperate on this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's ambition to develop a civil nuclear industry, and talks, they have been made complicated, and this is because of the region's politics and concerns over the weapons proliferation. What kinds of weapons proliferation? It is nuclear weapon proliferation, right? Now to understand this deal, you need to understand the region's geography first. Now you understand many of the countries in this particular region, they have the capabilities to generate nuclear power. This includes Iran, which generates nuclear power from its Bushehr civil nuclear plant. Similarly, United Arab Emirates, a very close ally of Saudi Arabia, it also has established a nuclear power plant with the help of French, that is Barakah nuclear power plant. Similarly, Iraq and Syria, they used to have nuclear power plant, but they were destroyed by Israel. Similarly, Turkey, another important player in the region, they have a established nuclear plant with new nuclear plants, which is expected to be formed quite soon. Similarly, Israel in this region is a nuclear power. It has the capability not just to generate nuclear power, but it also has the capability of having a nuclear bomb. Similarly, Egypt also is having its own civil nuclear plant. So in that regard, Saudi Arabia also wants to establish a nuclear power plant in the Al Uwa city. That is why it is trying to sign this civil nuclear deal. But having nuclear power plants in the region is not a cause of worry. You know what is a cause of worry? Cause of worry is that several countries in the region, say Iran, say Israel, who is already an established nuclear power, it has nuclear weapons, and some of them assume there are 200 in numbers. Similarly, Iran for a longer period of time, we understand, is trying to make nuclear bombs and nuclear weapons. Similarly, when other countries like Saudi Arabia, like United Arab Emirates, if they also start developing nuclear weapons, this will lead to a problem, what is known as nuclear proliferation. Nuclear proliferation means most of the countries in the region, they develop nuclear weapons on its own. And very close by, countries like Pakistan and India, they also have nuclear weapons of their own. And from United States perspective, more and more countries having nuclear weapons is not a right thing to do. Similarly, this region, we understand, as a whole has been volatile. There are multiple parties who become ally, and sometimes they even become enemies. So we would want these countries not to have nuclear weapons, so as to keep this region mostly safe from the risk of nuclear warfare, right? So that is why this is a cause of worry, and that is why Saudi Arabia, having even the ambitions to generate nuclear power, brings off the fears that one day these countries might start developing nuclear power of its own and nuclear weapons of its own. So this is why this news is so significant. Now you need to understand, first of all, the reasons why Saudi Arabia is wanting to have its own civil nuclear program. On the very basic level, you understand Saudi is one of the largest producer of crude oil, and historically it has been dependent on crude oil to generate power for its electricity needs, right? But Saudi is now trying to diversify away from based on crude oil to generate power, and now looking to adopt more and more nuclear energy. And this is because of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's his vision of 2020, and this is an economic plan. And based on this economic plan, Saudi Arabia wants to reduce the carbon emissions and free up crude oil as well as crude oil to give it to export markets. And this is the primary cause why Saudi is trying to make a nuclear power of its own. Last year, that is in 2024, 68% of Saudi's electricity was generated by burning gas, whereas 32% was done by burning oil. So this is, you can understand, primarily Saudi depends on fossil fuels to generate its power. But now Saudi is trying to move away from fossil fuels to more greener sources of generation of electricity, and this is in order to fulfill its greenhouse gas commitments, right? So therefore it is trying to generate more and more power using the using the nuclear power. Now atomic power, it is expected to displace some of that is some of the fossil fuels that the Saudi is using to generate electricity. It is going to be replaced by nuclear power, and this would free up crude oil for Saudi Arabia so that it can export it to other markets and make money out of it. So this is the ultimate intention that Saudi is wanting to do. First, it wants to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases from reducing its reliance on fossil fuels to generate electricity, and on the other side it is wanting to free up some of its crude oil that it can export to other countries and make money out of it. So this is the primary reason why Saudi wants to have a civil nuclear plan of its own. Now let us understand what is the problem in this regard. Now Saudi also has some of the strategic objectives. It is not just having economic objectives to reduce the dependence on crude oil for power generation, it also has some strategic objective. First strategic objective is that Saudi Arabia historically has been of the position that its old rival in the region, Iran, when it is developing nuclear fuel or nuclear weapons, Saudi does not want Iran to have its own nuclear weapons. So it has made a declaration that if Iran makes its own nuclear weapons, Saudi will also make its nuclear weapon. So this is actually a message to US that see, if you allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons, in coming future we'll also develop our own nuclear fuel and nuclear weapons, so that to keep Saudi safe from nuclear warfare. So this is Saudi's own ambition, that under the garb of nuclear power generation, it wants to start enriching uranium, which ultimately in future it might lead to development of nuclear weapons. Similarly, in January, Saudi had said that it will enrich uranium, which is a process which ultimately can also lead to enriching of uranium so much that it becomes a weapons grade uranium. Now, why you need to enrich uranium? See, uranium which is available naturally, it has a very small percentage of uranium, which is not even enough for it to generate electricity. So what you do is that you send uranium to centrifuges, and centrifuges, they purify uranium by enhancing the content of uranium in the uranium ore. And this enrichment process makes uranium good enough for power generation purposes. That is, it makes available 3 to 5% of uranium-235 in the overall uranium ore, and this is enough for you to generate nuclear power, right? But to make weapons out of it, you need about 90 to 95% enriched uranium-235, which ultimately leads to generation of weapons grade uranium. So this is a process. The starting of the process, you generate nuclear fuel which is enough for you to generate nuclear power, and ultimately when you enrich uranium so high, it becomes a weapons grade uranium. So Saudi is trying to say that if you don't stop Iran from making nuclear weapons, we'll also pursue the same path. And any deal with Washington would likely address the safeguards to assuage worries in terms of Washington, in terms of Western Hemisphere, that Saudi is not trying to make nuclear weapons. So this is why Saudi is trying to highlight, see, it is trying to pressurize US to not allow Iran to have its own nuclear weapons and also sign a deal with them. Now, the next question is, what benefit is it for United States to sign a nuclear deal with US? And there are again both economic benefits and also strategic benefits for US, right? Let us understand what is the economic benefits. Now, suppose if US signs a nuclear power deal with Saudi Arabia, most of the investment or most of the new nuclear plants that will be set up in Saudi will be done by US industry. So they will be in prime spot to win contracts to set up new nuclear power plants in Saudi Arabia. Similarly, it will also allow US to have an insight on nuclear power program of Saudi, and also Washington will try to keep a close check on Saudi Arabia that it only uses nuclear fuel to generate power and not make weapons out of it. So it fulfills not just economic but also strategic objectives of US to make this region free from nuclear power and nuclear weapons, right? So these are the two objectives why US is wanting to sign a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. Now let us understand there are certain roadblocks in this deal also. First roadblock is US's historic ally in the region, that is Israel. Now Israel itself is a nuclear weapons enabled country, but it does not want other powers in the region to have nuclear weapons, obviously to safeguard the interest of Israel. So therefore Israel has been primarily opposed to Iran having a nuclear weapon, and it is also fundamentally opposed to Saudi Arabia having a nuclear weapon. And also therefore this is the reason it is also opposing signing of a civil nuclear program, saying that now they will generate power and in coming future they will also start making nuclear weapons. Similarly, there are also certain procedural roadblocks. Suppose if agreement is signed between Saudi Arabia and US, but how or when the nuclear enrichment process will take place. There are two ways of it. Suppose if America sets up its own factory to enrich uranium and sells this enriched uranium to Saudi Arabia, and in that case these American owned and operated station, whether Saudi will invest in it, right? This is a big question. So this is a potential roadblock. If America highlights that they will only own and operate the enrichment plants, so you can think Saudi will not be in a position to invest in these plants. But if Saudi says we are going to own and operate a nuclear power station of our own, this brings a risk that Saudi in coming future will make nuclear weapons of its own. So these are the procedural issues that are creating a roadblock for signing of a civil nuclear deal between these two countries. Understood? How about thorium? Well, thorium, you can't use thorium automatically to generate nuclear power plant. This is the problem that India has. India has created a whole 3-stage nuclear process, so that following that process, it is able to use thorium to generate nuclear power. But we understand even that technology is few decades away. So coming to Saudi Arabia, they don't even have the technology to generate electricity from uranium because they do not have enriched nuclear uranium. And they want US companies to invest, and US is saying that sign a nuclear deal with us, like India did. Understood? So this is the problem, or this is the roadblock that it is creating in order to sign the nuclear deal between these two countries. Now moving to the second article, this I have taken from the United Nations website, and if you look at the screenshot, it says Secretary General has posted a video message on European Day which marks 75th anniversary of Schuman Declaration, right? So in this regard, Schuman Declaration becomes very important from our exams perspective. That is, May 9th every year is celebrated as European Day because this was the day when Schuman Declaration became active, and in 2025 it celebrated 75th anniversary of Schuman Declaration, right? So therefore, this event becomes important because it is the platinum jubilee of Schuman Declaration. Now the big question is, what is Schuman Declaration? Now Schuman Declaration is a declaration which was announced on May 9th of 1950 by then French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman. Who is this person, right? Now the proposal for bringing Schuman Declaration was that France and Germany, they will start making coal and steel uniformly or together, right? And this was to be placed under a common authority. That is, coal and steel production of these two countries will be managed by a common authority, not by the respective governments of these two countries. Now, in political science, there is a concept known as economic interdependence, right? Now, economic interdependence, it highlights that once country become economically interdependent on each other, the probability that these two countries going to war becomes very less, because automatically war will disrupt the economy of the region and it will automatically affect both of these countries adversely. So when companies or countries become economically interdependent, their overall chances of going into war reduces, right? So this is a theory in political science, and this theory was applied here in Europe, that they started from signing deals to uniformly produce coal and steel, and when they become interdependent on such important resources, they automatically chance were that these two countries fighting wars will reduce, right? So the objective of this deal was to prevent future wars between France and Germany by integrating their industries. Now in isolation, this is a very small deal, right? But this is very important geopolitically. Why? Because this signing of Schuman Declaration, it became the foundation of establishment of European Union. Because once European countries, they started integrating slowly, but they started with integrating their coal and steel production, and automatically and ultimately they become interdependent whole economically. And this establishment or beginning of European integration, it led to creation of European Coal and Steel Community, which was earlier the precursor of European Union. And slowly by slowly afterwards, we saw more and more aspects of European Union, be it currency, be it monetary policy, be it other aspects of the economy, trade, all of them started to integrate. So therefore, this was the beginning of European integration process, which we know right now in form of supranational organization known as European Union. And the initial members of Schuman Declaration were not just France and Germany, but also Italy, Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg. All are the important economies in the region. Understood? So that is why Schuman Declaration is so important. Now let's see if you are able to solve this particular question. In 2015, there was this question, Fortaleza Declaration was signed for what? This was signed for BRICS, right? So I have curated a same question on Schuman Declaration. What is Schuman Declaration, which is recently in news related to? Yes, option D is right. Sir, was this a case with Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh and Bharat? In what case you are asking? Economic interdependence. No, with Bangladesh, economic interdependence was not a big issue because India does not think that Bangladesh in coming future will fight a war with us. The problem with making Bangladesh, or the issue with making Bangladesh more developed, was that the immigration or illegal migration from Bangladesh will stop into India. If we provide jobs to Bangladeshi people in Bangladesh, automatically they'll not move into India. So this was the reason why India wants a developed Bangladesh. Now many political theorists, they've also highlighted that economic interdependence between India and Pakistan is so low, therefore they are fighting the wars. But they forget the idea that Pakistan sees India as a enemy. It sees India as a perpetual threat. So even if economic interdependence increases with India and Pakistan, this automatically will harm India and will benefit Pakistan. So therefore Prime Minister Modi has said categorically, terror and trade, it can't go on together. If you want to have trade with us, first stop terrorism. I hope I've made things clear. Now, I was talking about Prime Minister Modi. Here comes an article related to Operation Sindoor. But we are not going into Operation Sindoor. What we are going to understand that at the time Operation Sindoor was declared, Army was able to mobilize additional forces in border area and calling up reserve forces. And who were these reserve forces? These were Territorial Army, right? So in this regard, let us understand what is Territorial Army. But first, let me give you the context. Now, amid escalating tensions that happened between New Delhi and Islamabad last week, Indian military establishment actively began large-scale mobilization of additional forces in the border, including its reserve Territorial Army. And to ensure full strength in the event of contingency, this was done, and therefore Army mobilized additional reserves known as Territorial Army. Now, in a notification which was issued by Ministry of Defence, it announced activation of 14 out of 32 battalions of Territorial Army to be deployed across the country until February 2028. So this brings my attention to how the notification was issued and what actually is Territorial Army and how or in what ways can it assist Indian Army. Now, Territorial Army, another context is that earlier the central government empowered the Chief of Army Staff, that is the General of Indian Army, to call out every officer and personnel of the Territorial Army to provide essential guard and for supporting and supplementing the regular army. And this was done under Rule 32 of the Territorial Army Rules 1948, which allows central government to empower the Chief of Army Staff to take support of Territorial Army. So this is the precursor of the discussion. Now let us begin by understanding what is Territorial Army. Now, Territorial Army, it is a army consisting of part-time volunteer reserve force to Indian Army, and they are also known as Citizens Army. Now, this Territorial Army, it is made up of citizens who are gainfully employed civilians, but these civilians, they have also received their military training, and the purpose of giving them military training is that they can be called up for active duty during the times of emergencies, during the times of natural disasters, during the times of wars, or when there is a national emergency declared. And they or the people employed in Territorial Army, they continue with their civilian jobs during the peacetime and serve whenever they are required or called up by the army. So these are basically civilians who have been trained by army to help them in certain circumstances. And these circumstances are wars, natural disasters and national emergencies. Now, what you need to understand that these Territorial Army personnel, they hold military ranks. They get regular pay and perks whenever they are doing training and when they are in active service with the army. Otherwise, they'll be getting salaries from the employment that they are under. Okay. Now, many Territorial Army officers, they have also received gallantry awards. For example, like Kirti Chakra, Shaurya Chakra, etc. They've won that. Similarly, beside the infantry battalions, Territorial Army also includes departmental units who are linked to specific organizations, say for example, railways, India Post, telecom organizations, even PSUs like ONGC and IOC. They employ certain people who are also the members of Territorial Army. Now, they are also there in ecological battalions and task forces which are funded by state government. So, technically the personnel in Territorial Army, they can work in any government organization, be it a state government organization or a centrally owned government organization or even a PSU. Now, let us understand the brief history of Territorial Army. Now, the Territorial Army has its roots in the first war of independence that was fought in 1857, and here volunteer forces were raised to assist the British colonial army, right? And in 1917, an Indian Defence Force Act was signed where universities, they contributed to contingency to Indian Defence Forces and they were sent to First World War. That is, they had European branch, which was an auxiliary force, and an Indian branch, that was Indian Territorial Force. And notable Indian freedom fighters like Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, like Jawaharlal Nehru, like Mahatma Gandhi, they have served under volunteer forces of the then Indian Army or British Army. Understood? Now, the primary role of Territorial Army, what you need to understand is that they relieve the regular army from static duties. Now, army has many static duties, like they maintain hospitals, like they start schools, they undertake many engineering work also. So, this Territorial Army primary is formed to relieve regular army during the times of contingency, so that army can take up the most important task that it has, that is protection of India. Similarly, it is also meant to assist civil administration in dealing with national calamities, maintaining essential services in situations that may affect community or life or even national security. So, for example, you will see that these Territorial Army people, they are intended to provide units to regular army as and when they are required. So, they might also support military in their operations. They also have departmental units which can take over service and their affiliated factories, which might produce some kind of weapon systems, ammunitions, etc. Right? And this might also be the case that when there is a civil or industrial unrest or natural disasters, so automatically the ability of army to manufacture weapons or manufacture ammunitions takes a hit. So in that case, they can also call people of Territorial Army, specifically in these departmental units, who will assist in maintaining and working of these factories. Similarly, there are ecological battalions and task forces which are maintained by state governments. They focus on preserving and rejuvenating ecology through reforestation, and here also Territorial armies might assist the state governments. So in all, they assist not just the Indian Army but also the apparatus of the state. Now let's see if you are able to solve the particular question. No Sarang these days. Only Sunu has answered, others. Well, with reference to Territorial Army, consider the following statements. Article 33 of the Constitution allows for central government to authorize Chief of Army Staff to utilize support of Territorial Army as and when needed. Was it Article 33? No. There were separate rules created for it, known as Territorial Army rules, under which rule number 33 allows the Chief of Army Staff to mobilize Territorial Army. So, first statement is incorrect. It comprises only infantry battalions and has no affiliation with the civil departments or public sector undertakings. This is also incorrect. Why this is incorrect? Because this actually allows, and this actually includes departmental units who are engaged also in PSUs like ONGC and Indian Oil. So, second statement becomes incorrect. Territorial Army personnel are part-time volunteers who maintain their civilian jobs in peacetime. This is a correct statement. So, only third is correct, second and first isn't right. Now, sorry, C option should have been 3 only. So, in that case, only 3 only is the right answer. Option C is correct. Yes, Reshma, yes. Options were incorrect, sorry about that. No problem, only 3 is correct. Some of you have gotten this right. Now in foundation level batches, what we tell you is each and every important security related organization like CAPF, like Army, like Territorial Army, we cover everything in detail. Now to take admissions in May evening batch, what you need to do, the admissions is expected to close tomorrow. So please hurry up if you still haven't taken admission the May evening batch. To take admissions, what you need to do, go to a StudyIQ IS platform. This is the website that you need to go to. First, you will be needing to create an account, and once you create an account, click on Explore Courses. Now the default option that opens up is for the bilingual batches. But suppose if you're not comfortable in Hindi, you want to take education or your studies exclusively in English language, we have an option for you, that is UPSC IS English. What you need to do, click on this first tile, that will take you to the batch. Here it says that for diamond batches, the course fees is 39,499. But to take this admissions even at a discounted rate, what you need to do is you need to apply the code which is flashing on the bottom half of your screen, right? How to apply the code? Let me tell you. Click on buy now. Here you have to add a promo code. Once you are required to enter coupon code, here what you need to do is you need to write ATS live and click on apply. When you click on apply, see the discount of 7,000 rupees is applicable and the course fees of diamond batch is 32,499. Similarly, for platinum it's 27,500 and for gold it is 16,999. My recommendation to you is take the diamond batch because it is available at 32,499 and it has all the benefits of the courses that are available on StudyIQ IS platform. This is this slide, okay? But please make sure to take and apply the code ATS live to save 7,000 of yours and your parents' hard-earned money. Now moving back to the discussion. This is the next article that we are going to deal with it. This I have taken up from the Hindu newspaper, and if you read the headline of this article, this automatically is very funny. Who let the dogs out? But eventually, this article is mostly about a species known as Indian grey wolf. Why Indian grey wolf are in news? Because Indian grey wolf, although they are apex predators and ecological regulators of grassland, but in Maharashtra's Katbanwadi grassland, they are already endangered, and Indian grey wolf is now an added risk from dogs who are attacking the pups of Indian grey wolf or the weak members of the pack, and this has resulted into dwindling of the population. Now the scientists of the region, they have expressed concerns about crossbreeding that happens between dogs and grey wolf, and this can lead to spread of harmful infections and even impact the pack or wolf pack dynamics, right? So this is how interbreeding and intermingling with dogs might endanger the species and might also lead to changes in their behavior. So therefore, from this discussion, what becomes important? This particular grassland which is located in Maharashtra, in Pune, and the species that is Indian grey wolf. So let us discuss them one by one. Now this is the Indian grey wolf, and you can see how closely it resembles to the wild dogs, okay? Now, any species that is in news, you understand we have to follow three of the important facts relating to it, that is habitats, habit, as well as protection status. So let us understand these three facts about Indian grey wolf. Now Indian grey wolf, this is the biological name of the species, that is Canis lupus palpus, and it is a subspecies of the grey wolf which is found in Indian subcontinent and also in the regions of Southwest Asia. Now the habitats that these species prefer, it prefers scrublands, semi-arid and open grasslands, and pastoral agro ecosystems. Now the distribution of these species, that they can be found from western region in Israel to the eastern region in Indian subcontinent, and in India mainly they are found in states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, as well as parts of Maharashtra. So this was habitat of the species. Now let us understand the habits of this species. Now behavior of this species, that Indian grey wolves, they are generally nocturnal, which means like Batman, they wake up at night. Okay. Now during the time they hunt in small packs. Wolf, you understand, they hunt in larger packs. Larger packs means larger groups. But these Indian grey wolves, they don't hunt in larger packs, rather they hunt in small packs. And they are less vocal than other wolf species. So the chances it that the hunted won't be able to even know that the wolves are in the vicinity. Now in terms of appearances, they are intermediate in size, which is mean they are between the sizes of Tibetan as well as Arabian wolves, but they lack a thick winter coat, obviously because they are living in India, they are not living in very tundra and arid grasslands. Therefore, this having a very thin winter coat in them, it makes them adaptive to the warmer climates that prevail in the region of western parts of India, right? Now automatically let us understand the protection status. If you look at the IUCN Red List, they are enlisted as an endangered species, but when we talk about CITES, that has listed Indian grey wolf as Appendix 1 species, because it means otherwise if you don't control their international trade, they might be threatened even with extinction. Similarly, when it comes to India's Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, they are categorized under Schedule 1, which protects them and which provides them the highest protection status, similar to the ones that has been given to other critically endangered or endangered species like tigers, like ghadials, etc. Okay. Now, culturally also, Indian grey wolves are very important. Why? Because you might have heard about a piece of literature, that is Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book series, right? Now, in Jungle Book series, a wolf pack, that is a group of wolf, they adopt in Sioni area of Madhya Pradesh, they adopt a child known as Mowgli, and they teach them how to survive in the wild and in jungle while protecting them from the Bengal tiger species. In the book, they are named as Sher Khan, right? So this is why even culturally they have very much high importance because of the book Jungle Book and of Mowgli. You must have heard about it, I'm 100% sure. Now let us talk about why these are in news. Now in terms of forest rules, Maharashtra Forest Rules of 2014, it allows for removal and elimination of trespassing animals, including dogs, from reserve forest if they threaten the wildlife. But generally the forest officials, they are hesitating to cull these dogs because of the animal rights concerns, and rather they are opting for vaccination of these animals as an alternative, although in some cases it might be proving logistically difficult. Now when it comes to highlighting the complex animal and domestic dog interface, there are rising concerns in India's open and agroeconomic habitats, because people living in these areas, to protect them from wild animals, they use dog as pets. But there are also the chances that interaction of these wild animals and dogs, it might lead to emergence of zoonotic threats like canine distemper virus, which might ultimately affect the animals living in the wild. And sometimes when crossbreeding happened, that might also lead to genetic dilution of the species, like we have heard about Indian wolves, and this might also lead to hybridization and changes in the behavior pattern and the robustness of these species when it comes to wildlife. So therefore we are discussing these particular rules. Now before concluding this particular article, let us discuss the Kadbanwadi grassland, which is located in Maharashtra. This is located in Indapur Tehsil in Pune, and Kadbanwadi grasslands, it spans across 2000 hectares and it supports species like Bengal fox, striped hyena, Brahmini kite and Indian grey wolf. Now the most important part about these grasslands, that it inherits shepherd community, which traditionally have shared a symbiotic relationship with wolves for generations. So they don't see wolves as a threat to them, rather they exist peacefully, coexist peacefully, right? So this is why this Kadbanwadi grassland becomes important. Now let's see if you are able to solve this particular question. Now the last option for this question is none of the above. I hope you are visible, it is visible to you now. Answer. Well, you have to identify incorrect statements here. It is listed as a least concern species in IUCN Red List. Incorrect, I told you, these are listed as endangered species. Wildlife Protection Act 1972 places them under Schedule 1st, not Schedule 2. Kadbanwadi grassland in Maharashtra is home to Indian grey wolf species, is government notified wildlife sanctuary. This is not a wildlife sanctuary. Otherwise, I have told you about Kadbanwadi wildlife sanctuary, not the grasslands, right? So all these three are incorrect. So correct option is option C. Yes, all of you have gotten this right. Priyalata, option C is the right answer because none of them are correct. We have to identify incorrect statement. Okay. Now let's move to the next article. This talks about Ranthambore tiger sanctuary because a tigress has killed a forest ranger and this is her second victim in as many months. Right. So in this regard, let us understand few details about the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve, which was established earlier as the Savai Madhopur Game Sanctuary in 1995 by Government of India, and in 1973 they were declared as one of the tiger reserves under the Project Tiger, which was started by government to protect the population of wild tigers in India, and in 1980 they were transformed and given a higher status, that of a national park. Okay. Now, the location of Ranthambore National Park is that it is located in Savai Madhopur district of Rajasthan at a critical juncture where both the ranges of Aravalli and Vindhya meet in Rajasthan. So, this is a very important ecological location even in India, right? Now, this tiger sanctuary includes Ranthambore National Park, Savai Mansingh Sanctuary, as well as Kela Devi Sanctuary. Now, it also houses Ranthambore Fort, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this Ranthambore Fort is located very inside the Tiger Reserve also, and therefore tourists are allowed to visit this Ranthambore Fort during the daytime, right? And the rivers which are flowing through this protected area are Chambal and Banas. Banas is a tributary of Chambal River itself. Okay, so these are the two rivers that are flowing through the Tiger Reserve. Now, let us understand the geographical characteristics of these tiger reserve. Now, it is primarily characterized by rugged terrain, which you can automatically understand from the location it is at, that is in Savai Madhopur district. Now, this comprises of a mix of hills, plateau and valley. The terrain is rugged. Okay. Now, in terms of flora or the kinds of trees and plantation that is available in the region, it is dominated by tropical dry deciduous and thorn forest, and particularly the species of trees that are there is known as dhok trees. Right. Now, in terms of fauna, this tiger reserve not just includes tiger but other important predators like leopard, like sloth bear, jackal, striped hyenas, desert fox and even palm civet, right? So, this is the important details that we have covered about Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. Now, I've uploaded a separate video 2 weeks back, I guess, on Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. Ranthambore Tiger Reserve for the past few months have been in news for one reason or the other. Similarly, the third reason we have added in this our today's discussion. Okay. Now, to watch this complete video, I cover details not just about Ranthambore Tiger Reserve but also about the National Tiger Conservation Authority, right? This is the link of the video. Please use this link. I'll upload them in the notes and watch this video. This will completely solve everything that you need to know about the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. Okay. Now, let's see if you are able to solve this particular question. I'll get out of your way. Well, it is located in eastern part of Rajasthan, known for its tropical thorn forest. Both are correct. This reserve was initially a part of Savai Madhopur Game Sanctuary established in 1955. Again correct. Now, it is one of the natural habitats of Great Indian Bustard. This is incorrect. What is the natural habitat of Great Indian Bustard in India? This is Desert National Park in the state of Rajasthan, not Ranthambore. Right. So, therefore, third statement is incorrect. Therefore, option A is the right answer. Okay. Yes, barring a few, Amar, you've gotten it incorrect. Sonu Verma, you are right. Sonu Kumar, you're not. Office data. Tara, you're incorrect. Baga, Reshma, Rishi, all of you are correct. Now, let us move to the last article. This appeared in page 7 of the today's newspaper, and it talks about Prime Minister of India who is saying we need to have a whole of government and whole of society approach in order to eliminate the TB. Now, why? Yes, Desert National Park. Reshma, you're correct. Now, reforming India's commitment, which it has given to world that it will eliminate tuberculosis, Prime Minister Modi highlighted for whole of government and whole of society approach in scaling up of successful strategies nationwide, right? Because if I suppose government brings a scheme to eliminate any disease, government on its own can't do anything, right? If the society, if the people, if the healthcare sector does not pitch in, how do you eliminate a disease, right? So therefore it requires whole of government approach, that is every department of government needs to work in this regard, and not just government but also people living in a society need to work that. Now he was chairing a meeting to review status of national TB elimination program, and here PM stressed the need to analyze the trends of TB in urban and rural areas and based on people's occupation, so that we know what kind of occupations that peoples are employed in, they have TB, and what kinds of occupation are more vulnerable to TB. Similarly, PM also highlighted the importance of cleanliness through Jan Bhagidari, that is participation of the community, as a key step to eliminate the TB disease. So from this discussion, what becomes important is the disease itself, that is tuberculosis. Now it is a disease having bacterial origin, right? It spreads through inhaling tiny droplets from the coughs or sneezes of the infected person. So person to person transmission also happens in cases of TB. Now it is caused by a bacteria known as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and the transmission person to person happens through air, and even when people with lung TB, they cough, sneeze or spit, it propels the TB germs into the air and people inhaling it can get TB. Now the effects of TB in humans, that it most commonly affects your lungs, that is the pulmonary form of TB, but there are other forms of TB that affects other organs including your bone, right, which are known as extrapulmonary TB. Now is it curable? The answer is it is treatable and curable disease, that there are medicines, there are vaccines that will help you tackle TB, right? Now, one of the BCG injections that we get here, right, when we are born, this is a TB vaccine. Now, the problem with TB is that many people, they are consuming so much of medicines, it has led to emergence of drug resistant TB. Now, drug resistant TB occurs when the bacteria becomes resistant or immune to the drugs that are used to TB, and it means that the drug, it can no longer kill the TB bacteria inside you. Now, drug TB is spread the same way that the normal TB does, but what is different here, that it can occur when the drugs used to TB are misused or mismanaged. So, overconsumption of drugs, wrong consumption of drugs also can lead to formation of extra or the immune TB from diseases, right? Now these drug resistant TB are of two types, that is multi drug resistance and total drug resistant. MDR TB is when your TB does not respond to at least one of these medications, that is isoniazid and the rifampicin, which are the two most powerful anti-TB drugs, whereas XDR TB are the ones where people are resistant to not just these two drugs but also to any fluoroquinolone, which is at least one of these three injectable second line drugs known as amikacin, kanamycin and capromycin. So these are said to have XDR TB, right? So please remember the names of these drugs: isocyanide, rifampicin, amikacin, kanamycin and capromycin. Okay, these might be asked one way or the other in the exam. Now, what are the related facts when it comes to TB in India? Now, in terms of incidence and mortality, TB incidences in India, although they have fallen below 200 per lakh population, down from earlier 237 per lakh population, which is a 16% decline. Similarly, people dying from TB have also declined. Earlier it was 23 per lakh. Now there has been a 18% decline. Okay. Now, in terms of treatment success, you need to understand, obviously the severely drug resistant TB, that is XDR TB, the treatment success is lowest at 45%. Similarly, for multi-drug resistant TB, it is at 74%, whereas for other success rate is 68%. Okay. Now, what are the challenges that India is facing before eliminating TB? First is the high burden and slow decline in the incidence. Now, TB although has declined by how many percent? It has declined by 16%, but still it is not enough when you consider India's population, because it is still affecting 195 people per lakh population. Similarly, there are instances when the diagnosis of TB and its treatment is delayed. For example, over 50% of the TB patients still are taking care in the private sector who does not follow an even standard of care. Sometimes even people living in rural area, they do not get a hint that they indeed have TB, right? So it might lead to delays in the diagnostics of TB or finding whether that person has TB. In case there are delays in diagnostic, it might also lead to improper treatment, and mismanagement in the private sector also contribute to drug resistance. Also, when people are getting treated in the private sector and when they are not getting benefits from any of the government scheme, it is also leading to high out of pocket expenditures. So therefore, not just direct cost in seeking healthcare, but it also leads to indirect cost. Like suppose if you are working somewhere and you get TB, automatically you'll take off from the work. It might lead to wage loss. You might need to travel to the healthcare sector or healthcare center. It might lead to transportation cost. Similarly, in case you have to enlist the help of caregiver, you need to pay them also. This will also add to the cost of treatment, and this imposes financial burden to people, particularly people belonging to the lower strata of the society economically, because their jobs might go away. They might have to undertake extra expenditure like transportation, like caregiving support, and this leads to people not following the drug regime, which further leads to adding of the TB burden in India. Similarly, India also witnesses poor health system integration. First of all, when it comes to screening, suppose you are getting identified in the private sector that you have a TB, but what if that organization does not respond to the government saying that so many patients have come to us who have TB? So government will not have the idea. Therefore, the linkages between private sector and public healthcare sector is one of the problems that when it comes to identifying the burden on mortality of TB. Similarly, there are social stigma and social barriers which particularly prevent women and people from vulnerable groups to seek medical help. It discourages them from seeking care and completing treatment, and therefore, afraid from stigma and social barriers, they do not go to healthcare centers. And similarly, governments and its infrastructure outreach, particularly to marginalized groups like tribals, like migrants, like homeless, they are not so enough, especially in the geographically isolated areas and people coming from lower socioeconomic strata of the society. So these are the challenges that persist when it comes to dealing with the menace of TB. Now let us understand what needs to be done. First is government needs to strengthen early detection and diagnostic, and for that it needs to scale up the rapid molecular testing at the primary healthcare centers itself. We need to expand AI based chest x-rays and upfront molecular testing so that the time taken to test the patients becomes reduced, right? And it also needs to introduce incentive for early reporting and diagnostic, particularly for the hospitals in the private sector, so that these hospitals indeed inform the government and government gets the clear picture of the problem of TB. Now also government needs to ensure complete financial protection, not just taking care of the healthcare bills, but government also needs to provide some kind of social security so that it covers their wage loss, it covers their transportation cost, it covers their caregiving support. So also it needs to pilot livelihood program for TB survivors so that the social stigma, the social discouragement that people gets reduced, right? Also, it needs to improve the engagement with private sector. For example, it needs to introduce a standardized TB procedure which the private healthcare sectors need to follow in order to treat TB. Also, it needs to establish a mandatory referral system so that once the TB is detected in the private healthcare facilities, automatically they are referred to the government hospitals. And also, they need to offer incentives to private healthcare providers for compliance with the NTEP, National TB Elimination Program guidelines. Okay. Further, also socially, government needs to work in case to address stigma and create awareness. Particularly, it needs to launch a targeted TB program, much similar to the ones that it used to target COVID-19 pandemic. That is, encourage people who have gotten treated from TB to act as champions and lead the awareness drives, particularly at the grassroots level where vulnerable people like women, like marginalized people live, so that they know in case you have TB, it is no harm for you to get treated in the healthcare sector. There is no shame in that. Any people can get TB. The problem is not to have TB. The problem is not getting yourself treated with it, right? Similarly, targeted support for vulnerable groups needs to be done. Especially, you need tailored strategies in tribal areas, in migrant communities. And for that, what you need to do is have a mobile TB care units which can go to these remote areas and approach these underserved people. And also, you need to ensure that the gender sensitive and culturally appropriate TB care delivery is that, so that particularly women who feel shame in getting themselves treated do not feel ashamed and marginalized. Okay, so this is how you need to deal with TB. Now I've curated a question also. So the ones who are not Anything the ASHA workers can do here, ASHA workers can actually play a key role in targeted support for vulnerable groups, because women itself can approach the other women who have TB and encourage them to seek health care problems, okay? And some women who have gotten treated from TB can also enlist themselves as TB champions, understood? So this is where women can play a very important role in our society, okay? Now this is the question. So suppose if you're not giving the prelims, I'll encourage you all to write the question, submit the answers in the ATS live discussion. I will evaluate them, okay? Now this brings the end to our today's session. This is the link which you need to submit your answers on, and also I will make the notes available here so you can download it. So I'll see you again tomorrow at 4. Please have a very good day and a very